now. Just to start out, I want to thank everybody for their time today and taking time out of their schedules to join this webcast, going over Sage HRMS and our Paperless HR features today. My name is Ryan Watson. I'm a field sales engineer for Sage, and I particularly focus on Sage HRMS and the entire portfolio of HR products. I do support Canada, the Caribbean, and Western United States for Sage HRMS in the portfolio of HR products. Today's webcast is being recorded, so just for a few housekeeping requests, if you do have any questions as we go through this presentation, please feel free to use the chat feature, send those in, and I'll be routinely monitoring that as we go through the webcast to answer any questions as we go. During the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A session, so if you would like to take yourself off of mute at that point in time, you're more than welcome to do so. So before we get into the presentation itself, just have a quick agenda to set for today. Now, I know most of you currently have Sage products, so you're likely aware of who we here at Sage and who we are. I will be going over a little bit of information about Sage, and if there is anyone out there that is new to Sage, that's why we're doing that. We'll be then going over why we should have an HR system in place and how Paperless HR helps with our HR environment. From there, we'll be diving into a live presentation of our Paperless HR solutions, going through the employee engagement side of it, that employee self-service, the manager self-service portion of it, as well as completely paperless forms, in which we can take your paper forms today and create electronic files and workflows for you. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to send in chats right from the chat feature box, and we'll be able to answer those as we go along here. So to start out with who we here at Sage are, we are a market leader for integrated accounting, human resources, payroll, and payment systems. We're positioned to support the ambition of world businesses. Particularly, we here at Sage, as well as our channel partner community, we're all passionate about helping organizations achieve their goals and being successful. So throughout the globe, we have a roughly 14,000, a little under 14,000 now, over 13,000 employees worldwide, supporting entrepreneurs and businesses to achieve their goals across 23 countries. So really today's webcast is about how paperless HR and the HR environment can contribute to the success of an organization. Before we get into the presentation, the live presentation, we'll be exploring how that paperless HR can contribute to the success of your organization. But prior to that, we need to first define what makes an organization. Modern day, we can look out into the environment and see that there are organizations that have very similar products, very similar services, they're targeting the same segments, but at the same time, they can have vastly different results in their business outcomes. So why is it that some companies can be thriving while others are not? And what is that distinct difference between a good company and that great company? So this is an answer that we can really dive into when we look at what makes an organization. That is their people. The people that make up an organization are that company's unique and biggest asset. For most companies, it's also their largest expense. So, and this is where I really like to differ from calling an employee an expense, because I personally don't like being called an expense. I like being looked at as an investment. After all, an investment has a healthy return that pays out over time. In other words, the investing inside of your employees will build up your employee potential with that healthy payout over time, and not necessarily immediately, but within that worthwhile payout over time. Now, rather than thinking in terms of ROI, as many of us have been programmed through years of school, years in business, we here at Sage, we'd like to challenge you to amend that ROI thought process and put it into what we call the return on your employee investment, or ROEI. After all, as we've been discussing so far today, is that a company is only as good as its employees. We're used to talking about an organization if the organization itself is a person. But an organization does not have ideas, nor does it give service, and is by itself not efficient, nor is it productive. The people that make up that organization, they do and they are. And not to directly quote Richard Branson or paraphrase it, but if you focus in on treating your employees, they in turn will push that forward to your customers, resulting in a better customer experience. Therefore, how we treat our employees, how we invest in our employees, this has a huge influence on the bottom line. And in many cases, investing in your human capital has a larger effect than investing in marketing or R&D. So in short, this is all about attracting and retaining the right talent. And today, we're not going to be going in about how we will be attracting it. We'll be mainly talking about engagement that really leads to retaining talent. After all, engaged employees remain with their employers. And with Sage HRMS, we have a comprehensive solution for an entire portfolio of HR, everything from hire to retire of your employee, such as payroll processing and management, recruiting and onboarding, risk mitigation, compliance, time and attendance management solutions, complete benefit enrollment, benefit management inside the system, paperless HR, as we'll be going over today, talent, which is both learning and performance management, and complete reporting capabilities to enhance your decision-making procedures. Today, as I said, we'll be focusing on that paperless HR, the employee engagement through their self-service portal, as well as the ability of taking your forms from paper and creating electronic files following your workflow. I have a few more slides that are specifically developed for the paperless HR portion of it. I'm going to start out with HR actions, which we'll be seeing today, and how we can support everyday forms for your entire employee life cycle. That is pre-employment and onboarding capabilities, employee self-service, allowing them to go out, putting requests for leave of absence, or setting their own goals, initiating performance evaluations or appraisals, allowing them to put in comments and self-scoring, all the way out to managers or HR, having the ability of requesting transfers of employees or promotions, putting in occupational health and safety incident forms, approving those leave of absence requests, or even initiating them on behalf of that employee, as well as the performance and goal-setting capabilities. Every form that we'll be seeing today, they are completely a standardized template, and you can not only use those, but you can customize them as well as build out completely custom forms. With HR actions as well, we'll be seeing how we can streamline the procedures for HR. And we'll be doing this by seeing how we can build efficiencies, we can be consistent with our forms, increasing our productivity, all while having insight and control over the individual forms and where they are. And we'll be building out the efficiencies by simplifying the completion of forms for your employees. They'll have the same look, the same feel that they're used to, and they'll be consistently worked through the same workflow. So you can rest assured that any employees that are typically finding loopholes and workarounds will follow the same workflow that you set up based off of your business rules. Now, increasing the productivity, what this is really reducing manual data entry. So no longer will that employee be filling out a piece of paper, handing it into HR, and then HR is placing that information inside of Sage HRMS manually. We're pushing that downstream to the employee or to the manager to enter the data themselves, and then based off of your business rules and your policies, the workflow will route through the organization, and once the final approval has been added, it will then update Sage HRMS. All while this is going on, you do have full insight and control over where forms are. You can see any managers or any representatives that are waiting on approvals, any forms that are waiting for those final approvals, and you have full control over moving them throughout the procedure if needed. So with HR actions, as you can imagine, with all the forms that we've talked about thus far, is that you can really eliminate the paper inside of your organization. All of the stacks of paper that can happen, such as the employee onboarding novel. So as we move into this, we're going to move from this presentation web deck, and we're going to move into a live presentation of the software itself. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And if you would like the full screen, I should have said this earlier, there is two opposing arrows in the corner of the screen from the WebEx that will full screen your image as well. So here you should be able to see the employee self-service portal loaded up inside of on my desktop here. This is right inside of a web browser. For today, I am using Google Chrome. However, if you do have any employees that are using Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, they'll also have the ability of accessing your employee self-service portal. Now, of course, I'm not going to force you to use my demo environment. Dunedin Enterprise, that is my presentation company. So we can change out the logos here, have your company logo posted, your own welcome message here for your employees, completely configurable to meet your needs as well. And we do have different color schemes so we can adjust the look and feel to match what your employees are used to. Now, the very first part about this is with the employee self-service, we're starting the ball rolling of allowing employees to really take control of their employment cycle. So anytime an employee is new, they can create their first-time user registration here based off of your requirements and what information you want the employee to send in order to create their login, as well as any employee that may have forgotten their password. Rather than having to come to HR to reset their password, you can simply hit forgot password and answer any of those security questions to reset their own password. Now, once we are inside, I do have everything under the sun turned on for my presentation environment. Being the employer and the administrator of the solution, you do have full capabilities of adjusting what employees can see. So you can come into the setup and say whether they have no access, is it view only, can they update it, and if so, does it go through an approval or a notification process prior to updating Sage HRMS? And if it does go through those approval or notification procedures, you can define what role will be sent these notifications or these approval requests prior to updating Sage HRMS. Not only can you do this on the employee side, but you also have the ability of editing what managers have access to. So at an employee level here, every employee inside of your organization will have an employee tab. This is their own information. Then we'll have managers that will have a manager tab. This is where that manager can view their direct report information. And then even fewer will have the administrative tab. So as an employee, they'll be able to view their own information. They'll be able to see and make edits if allowed. And some items in here, I am logged in as a U.S. employee. Other items that are differentiated for Canadian employees, such as Social Security will be social insurance number, their address will have street address, and rather than saying state, it'll say province, and we'll have postal code rather than zip. So there is localization in here. The reason why I'm logged in under a U.S. employee is so I have full capabilities of showing everything inside the system. Now, if you are able to make any edits or the employees are allowed to change, say, their address, they will see the edit button and they can make those selections. Type in the new address in here and submit this for approval. Their manager or HR, whomever is doing the approval, they will receive a notification which will trigger an email to them, letting them know that there is a request that's waiting for approval. So that manager or that HR representative, they can log in here and see their current address, what their new address will be. They can add any notes if necessary, and ultimately accept or reject this change request. The employee as well, they'll be able to have access to their contact information, their dependents, beneficiaries, emergency contact information, education, skills, events on their employee file. Again, anything inside of the employee inside of the Sage HRMS core module, they would be able to see that if you would so like. As well, if we are not using a time and attendance module, but we would still like to allow employees to request time off, we can have it set up time off capabilities. And the plans are being pulled from your plans inside of Sage HRMS, as well as terminology in here can be changed. It quickly allows employees to view their available time, anything that's been accrued, what's been taken, any requested time. They can select the down arrow to view the information about their requests, as well as make any edits, or if need be, they can remove the request if necessary. Simply add a new one, select the plan that they're pulling from, the dates that they're pulling, that they're requesting off, amount of hours, and they can submit any comments directly to their supervisor. The supervisor will also receive a notification based off of these time off requests, and right from their message center, they can accept or reject these requests. As well, for a manager in their manager tab, they'll be able to view particular employees and see their balances, or they can dive down and see any requests that they've sent in. As a manager, they'll also have a view into a time off calendar where they can select particular days and see any employees that have requested that day, what the status is it rejected, has it been approved? I can move forward and back in months and see any pending. So an employee and the manager have full insight into time off capabilities. Some of the other items that an employee has the capability of viewing in here is their benefit package. So they can view the benefits that they're enrolled in and any deductions that they have. As well, if you would like, you can show what the employer's contribution to their plans are. The nice thing is, within the employee self-service, you can also load up links or attachments to any page inside the system. So if there's additional items that you want to have in here for an employee that has education, you can place in different links or different attachments in here. Now, beyond this information, you can allow employees to have access directly into their history within the organization. They can view their compensation history, every raise they've received throughout their tenure with your company, their job information, every position they've held, their performance reviews. And what's most important to most employees is the ability of pulling their pay stubs or their pay advices. Building this in with either Sage HRMS payroll, Sage 300 payroll, or Sage 300 CRE payroll, we can bring in the pay stubs directly from those products. So the employee can log in, click their pay history, and view that stub directly online. So if you do have an employee that's applying for a loan, whether it's an auto loan or a mortgage, and they need to provide their last 3 pay stubs, they can go online, have access, save them, print them out, supply them as needed, rather than having to go to HR or payroll for a reprint. Now on the manager side, they'll be able to view employee compensation information. So they'll be able to view their direct report information with the most current information up front, and then they can always dive into that employee's history for that particular tab that we're in and quickly switch through each employee. They'll have their job information, their performance reviews, emergency contacts, again, phone, education, skills, length of service, what you would like to allow the manager to have access to. One of the nicest features in here is the ability of adding in notes on the employee file. So a manager can come in, log in, attach notes directly to their direct reports, and have view of any notes that they're allowed to see. Now inside of the core module, all notes are authored by different authors, so we can have security set into this, in which HR logs a note inside of the core HR module in which it has the author HR. That note is not going to show up inside of the manager's file. So if you do have an employee that comes to HR, there's an employee-manager conflict, we log that note in there, it's authored by HR. We log that note that states that there's a conflict there. The manager can come in here, log in, they will not see that. So the chance of retaliation can be eliminated. As well, if you do have any managers that are taking a leave of absence or they're taking time off, any of those requests as they're submitted that need to be approved, we can send a temporary approver while that manager is on a leave of absence or they're on vacation, and someone else in the meantime can receive those requests and approve or reject them. So beyond what we've seen thus far inside of the employee self-service, we can add in from additional attachments such as Sage HRMS Train to allow employees to view their courses, what's available for them to take, and their certification history. And we can even link in here Cyber Recruiter, which we'll go into depth more next month on our webcast about recruiting and onboarding, to allow managers to create requisitions or view recruiting, as well as even more in-depth with posting of trainings through CyberTrain online. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions in the chat before we go into the paperless forms section of this. Don't see any questions so far, which is fine. If you do have any questions, remember, you can use the chat feature, send over the questions. We'll be able to address them as we go. So what we're going to move into now, outside of the core employee self-service, is that paperless form capabilities, in which your employees can have access right from their employee self-service to onboarding forms, performance evaluation forms, request changing forms, right online. So the first thing I'm going to go through is this dynamic forms checklist. This is, I often joke about this on personal presentations when we're one-on-one, in which I always recommend that we rename this dynamic forms checklist. This is our internal Sage name for this. Any of these tiles here, we can make those changes as necessary, as well as relocate them. So I always joke around, name this required forms and place it up at the very top here, so as employees log in, that's the first thing that they see inside of the system. And this is where it's going to house and group the forms that are required for them. So with the dynamic forms checklist, this will build out required forms based off of your individual policy. So here are all of your onboarding forms. I have a very simple 5-form onboarding for this employee, annual performance reviews that will be brought together, and they will only show up when they're necessary. So for example, these performance evaluations, at the end of the year, once your performance evaluations normally kick in, these forms will show up at that point in time and then disappear afterwards or once they're completed. And the same thing for the employee onboarding. Once they've completed these forms and they're approved, they'll be removed from that employee's required tasks. And some of the forms, what we can do here, such as onboarding capabilities, is employee data confirmation. Now that we've hired the employee, we want to make sure that the information that they provided inside of their application hasn't changed. Maybe they've relocated closer to the office with the new position, so we can gather any new information. If they have changed their address, we can make sure we have an updated one, as well as start to gather information beyond what was provided, such as emergency contact information. And these are just standardized templates. If you needed to customize these or build out completely custom pages, you have that capability with HR Actions. As well, you can post links into them or post files. So if you have an employee handbook that you want to have your employees always to have access to, we can place that right into it to where your employee can download this. And then they can even e-sign that they accept the terms and condition of employment. And it's just an example of a way that we can do e-signatures where they can place their name in, either use a radial dial or a drop-down box, place in their information, and mark the date that they're signing this. Everything is timestamped so we can see exactly when these have been submitted, as well as the approvals. At any time, if necessary, we do have full insight of completed forms. So if you ever have an employee that states that what is on or what's being told to them does not meet the terms and conditions to their employment, you can come in here and see when the last time they signed their handbook. They can drop down the box, quickly search for that employee or that form, see this information, and then select, okay, for Joseph Block with his last onboarding form or his last handbook acknowledgement, it's right here. Here's the date and time that you signed and agreed it, and here's the date and time stamp of when it was approved. If necessary, we can even print these out. Some of the other items in here that we can do within within these forms are evaluations. We can allow employees to initiate a goal plan. What are their professional goals for this coming year? And the terminology and the wording that's put in here, you can completely configure that. So if you have your own version of what makes a SMART objective, how is it trackable, how can we measure it, you can place that in here and allow your employees to read over it before they set their goals. Once they finish filling this out, they can submit this off for approval to their manager. The manager can then fill out or make any changes as necessary. We can send it back to the employee for verification prior to going to HR for validation and final approval. At the end of the year, this information can be brought into their annual evaluation, in which the employee can initiate that as well. They can add any supporting attachment. We can add that in here. The employee can then view the organization goals, place in their own comments on how they're meeting that, place how they're self-scoring themselves. Even within these text boxes, they also have an editor of the information in here. It's a WYSIWYG editor, or what you see is what you get. So they have the capability of making adjustments in here. Now, of course, I'm not going to force you to use the presentation environment's organization goals, so this can all be configured, even down to the assessment scoring. So you may have different terminology rather than exemplary, exceeds standards, fully effective. You can change all of this information in here. So beyond these dynamic forms in here, there's a considerable amount of information and forms that you can add in and allow your employees to initiate actions on their own behalf, or manager initiating actions on the employee's behalf. So here are just a few examples, and you can break these down to availability of forms by different departments, different locations of employees. So multiple levels you can break down, whether it's an employee form or is it a manager form. So there's a lot of configurations that you have control over here. Some of the other items that I've seen companies use in the past, and the reason why I have it in my presentation environment as well, a non-disclosure agreement, you can place that, or a non-compete form in your onboarding capabilities. Have all of your information in here, your legalese, as well as that e-signature capability. Now, on the manager initiating forms on an employee's behalf, they can select which employee they want to initiate it, whether it's a direct report, an indirect report, or if they have the capability, they can even search for an employee. So HR can initiate a form for any employee. We can select that employee and select what kind of form we're looking to initiate here. So we can initiate, say, an occupational health and safety form. We can come in here, submit this form, and have all of the information that's going to be necessary: case information, dates and times of the incident, locations, what was the employee doing and what happened to the employee during that incident, as well as treatment that was initiated, any workers' comp, dates that was filed, closed, lost time, medical costs. And this will update the Occupational Health and Safety tab inside of Sage HRMS and automate the completion of your WSIB Form 7 form as well. Some of the other options in here: allowing a manager to initiate other forms on the behalf of the employee. They can initiate job changing forms, pay change forms, approve LOA absences or initiate those absences on the employee's behalf, termination or separation forms. So there's a lot of capabilities in here. The workflow that you can schedule in here, there's a lot of capabilities with that as well. So if we go to a change of job and pay, for example, let me get back to the form I was just at. We go into that pay and change of job form. The workflow and the routing for this form can be configurable based off of calculations. So rather than going out to a manager, or from manager initiating, going to HR for approval and then sending it off to payroll, if it's anything below 3%, a manager is allowed to do that, and it follows that normal workflow. If it's anything above 3% for this example, it'll go off to the CFO of the organization for that approval. So if we come in here, we set in the effective date that we want this pay change to take place, the date that we want this to be submitted, as well as any supporting documentation in here. If we have that manager that's requesting a Powerball winning raise for this employee, when we initiate this, it's going to remove Veronica Bell, which let me add in a supervisor since this is also a change of job and pay. So if I'm submitting this out with this pay increase, it's to remove Veronica Bell and add in, it's going to add in Shirley Douglas, who's the CFO of my presentation environment. So when I initiate this, and scroll back down, we can see that it's removed Veronica from this. So it can do smart calculations on your behalf. Now, of course, inside the solution, as I said earlier, you do have full sight of where any of these forms are at any time, so I can select a particular form and see that where they're being routed, who we're waiting on for these forms to be completed. And if necessary, if you do have a business requirement that any forms that say once they've hit 24 hours with an employee or with the approver, if they don't touch it, you want it to automatically be moved to the next step, that can be configured inside of HR Actions as well. Simply view any forms that you're able to complete yourself, and then you can approve or reject these forms also. Once the final approval is completed, again, that will update Sage HRMS. So we're removing that manual entry or that dual entry of data, pushing this as downstream as far as possible to your employees, to your managers to initiate actions, and then update inside of HRMS. So that is the employee self-service portal as well as the HR actions in those paperless forms. I'm going to take a second to pause and see if there's any questions that have come in thus far before we close out to a sneak peek of what our next webcast will be at the end of April and opening up for a Q&A session. Let me just see if there's any questions that popped up. Okay, so there's nothing so far. So just as a quick sneak peek of what we'll be exploring next period, we'll be exploring the recruiting and onboarding capability on April 27th, the same time as today at 1 p.m. Eastern, where a manager can come in and create those requisitions online right through CyberRecruiter, post it out to your career website, and then you can start to gather in those applicants through the solution and hire them directly from CyberRecruiter into Sage HRMS and initiate the onboarding procedures as we went through a little bit today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to thank you all for your time today. Stop sharing my screen and move over back into the presentation. Just thank you all for your time. We're going to open this up for any questions. If you would like to explore further in depth, I would invite you to go to sagehrms.com. We can dive further into on-demand webcasts, as well as follow up with the business partner that invited you today for this presentation. They likely will follow up with you afterwards as well, just to make sure that if you do have any questions, we can get those answered. And if you would like a more personal presentation, please feel free to follow up your business partner, ask those questions. I will likely be the one that would be presenting a one-on-one with you as well, so I would welcome the chance to speak with you more one-on-one also. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to send them through. And we'll be able to address any questions online as well. If you would like, you're more than welcome to take yourself off of mute, ask your question, and I'll stop the recording now.